A violent abuser and North Shields sex offender, David Smith, has been sentenced to 4 years in prison for inflicting years of domestic and sexual abuse on his former spouse. David Smith, 40, commenced his campaign of abuse against then-partner Louise Sutherland-Knowles, 39, following the inception of their relationship in 2018. However, David Smith's conduct rapidly devolved into aggressive and controlling behaviour, ultimately escalating to physical violence. David Smith employed coercive techniques and threats to dominate Louise Sutherland-Knowles, although his numerous infidelities throughout their relationship. Subsequent to the termination of their relationship in 2022, David Smith continued to incessantly and unwarrantedly text, call, and email Louise. Subsequent to her disregard, he would appear uninvited at her residence and workplace. Louise's mother became increasingly alarmed by the actions her daughter was enduring, prompting her to report David Smith to Northumbria Police for stalking. This report would constitute the initial of 3 inquiries Louise would be required to endure over the offences perpetrated against her by David Smith. In December 2022, David Smith faced charges of stalking. Nevertheless, within days, in an attempt to visit Louise Sutherland-Knowles, and in defiance of stringent bail restrictions pertaining to the stalking offence, David Smith ascended a 6-foot fence to access her yard, wielding a huge knife and shattering a window in his effort to enter the premises. He executed this action shortly before 2 a.m. while Louise Sutherland-Knowles was asleep in the house with her children. She was roused by the sound of a thud, after which David Smith was startled by a neighbor and fled. He was swiftly apprehended following Louise's notification to the authorities. The following day, Louise Sutherland-Knowles visited the Middle Engine Lane police station to report that David Smith had sexually assaulted her throughout their relationship. She recounted that on the evening of May 7, 2022, Smith had hurled his phone and pizza against a wall, subsequently striking her face with some of the debris. He restrained her against the wall and violated her sexually by inserting his hands into her pants. In February 2023, barely 1 month later, David Smith admitted guilt to stalking Louise and received a restraining order. In September of the previous year, David Smith was charged with possession of a bladed weapon and criminal damage, pertaining to the incident in which he visited her residence during the night. On May 7, he appeared at Newcastle Crown Court and entered a guilty plea to the charges. In April 2025, subsequent to an intricate investigation by the Forces Safeguarding Department, David Smith was charged with assault on a female by penetration and assault occasioning actual bodily harm, based on Louise's final report. On July 21, David Smith, from Brandling Court, North Shields, reappeared before Newcastle Crown Court, where he was sentenced to 4 years imprisonment after pleading guilty to sexual, knife, and assault offences. In addition to his prolonged term, he will spend an additional 3 years on licence upon his release from jail and must serve a minimum of 2/3 of his sentence before becoming eligible for parole. David Smith was permanently registered on the Sex Offenders Register and received a 6-year restraining order to safeguard Louise. Subsequent to the sentencing, Louise Sutherland-Knowles has made the audacious choice to relinquish her perpetual right to anonymity as a victim of a sexual offence and disclose her traumatic narrative in the intention of illustrating that abuse can manifest in various forms. She is urging any individuals impacted to report to law enforcement and get assistance.